Non, assez proche, puis les surveiller. Tandis qu'Calypso, tu vois, ce qui est...
Welcome to the last session or the last presentation for the 4th Digital Transformation and Government Conference. Absolutely delighted you could make it. My name is Bob Wiseman, the host. And now we are extremely fortunate to have retired General David Anderson, the Senior Advisor, Digital Transformation, to talk to us about the Canadian Armed Forces Digital Campaign Plan, strategic plan moving forward. So Mr. Dave Anderson is Mr. Dave Anderson, General, is the Senior Advisor, Digital Transformation to Chief Combat Systems Integration, who in turn is a direct report to the VCDS, the Vice Chief of Defense Staff. He's been involved in the Armed Forces Digital Transformation file since 2018 as a general, public service executive, and now a consultant. He was a key contributor to the design and writing of the Canadian Armed Forces Digital Campaign Plan. Dave commanded 1st Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group and served in postings worldwide: Cyprus, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, UK, Washington, and retired after serving as Chief of Staff Readiness at the Canadian Joint Operations Command, where he led the team that produced a pan-domain force employment concept. Mr. Anderson holds a Bachelor of Military Arts and Science from the Royal Military College and a Master of Science in National Security Strategy from the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. So without further ado, over to you, David. Thanks very much.
So the short version of that is General Anderson was in for a very long time, 40 years, and the warranty on his body ran out at 37 years. And people ask me how long I've been out, and I've been out for 12 inches. Okay, 8 inches of hair and 4 inches of gut. Okay, I used to be light infantry, and now I'm middle heavyweight infantry. I agreed to take this gig because it helps me with it's part of my therapy for my almost crippling shyness that I faced throughout my life. Je sais que c'est une conférence qui est plus ou moins internationale, but I need to reflect the Canadianness of it. Si vous avez des questions en français, je peux essayer de les répondre en français, mais honnêtement, je suis bilingue seulement après ma 2e bière, puis avant ma 4e bière. So in other words, if you bring me 3 beers, I'll answer your question in French. I'm well aware that I'm the last guy on a sunny Friday before you get your chance to buy the 3 beers that you're going to give to Dave. So I'll try and keep this crunchy and frosty. Okay, digital transformation. I've been on the file since 2018 and we haven't got anywhere, so I'm the problem, right? We see it as a journey, it's not a destination. And it started with the digital discussion paper in December of 20. I co-wrote it with another worker, about 30 pages, and it was designed to set the framework for the discussion, the grammar, the vocabulary, the grammatic rules, if you will, the baseline concepts, the intellectual framework. We then briefed the DM and the CDS and offered them the Deputy Minister and the Chief of Defense Staff, and asked them to choose their level of digital ambition. D&D is very, very difficult. Yeah, there you go. It's very different from any other governmental department in Canada. And the reason is everywhere else, the DM is the king or the queen. That's not the case in D&D. We have something called the diarchy. So policy and resources belong to the Deputy Minister. Our output, which is operations, belongs to the Chief of Defense Staff. And so you have to get both sides, and they don't necessarily agree. From February, for the rest of that year, we prepared the D&D Digital Transformation Office concept. And for those of you who know Christiana Cavazzoni, who's over at Supply Ontario, she was the lead on her side, and I was the lead on the CAF side as an EX at that point. We weren't getting anywhere, so in January of 22, the CDS decided we need to start pushing on. We can't wait for the enterprise, because meanwhile, our adversaries are getting faster and our allies are getting further ahead of us. And we can't afford, geez, I'm doing it. We can't afford to do that. So a week later, 2 weeks later, the Vice Chief of Defense Staff issued some direction on the campaign plan, and I'll take you through that process. And we released it in June of last year. At Christmas last year, it was decided to take the ADM, data innovation and analytics, and turn it into digital transformation. Meanwhile, we worked on the digital directive, which is how we actually make the campaign plan happen, and worked on the outcome-based plan. And we finally released that. We just released that directive. So I'm going to just take you a little bit through the journey. It's going to show you the rigor to our thinking, because that's how we do this. Is just planning. and it's what we do better than most. So this is how we briefed the why way back in January of 21. Basically said we had a whole bunch of unconstrained initiatives, but they weren't aligned. So we were never going to get to we're never going to be digital because they're all going in different directions. We didn't want to integrate them because that would stifle all the goodness that was out there. But we did want to align them. You can see on the right-hand side there, the option space that we created. We offered the Deputy Minister and the CDS, and they chose digital transformation. I'm really glad they did. The context is, there's an institutional context in terms of being conforming with Government of Canada direction, et cetera. There's a strategic context in terms of our place in the world with our allies and our ability to deliver on strong, secure, and engaged. And there's an operational context, which is the way we frame it is we need to stay ahead of our adversaries and abreast of our allies. And then we identified what success would look like, understanding the transformation has two elements to it. It's basically about enhanced decision-making, effectiveness and speed and accuracy in both the corporate space and the battle space. We developed some principles of how we would approach this. And I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to read that. I'll wait for Brad's lips to stop moving. Okay, so there's a couple of key things in there. One is that we can't de-link operational institutional transformation. One leads the other, one demands the other. It's about people, it's about culture, it's about leadership. That we need to understand that our operational mindset, particularly in the CAF, leads us, gives us a competitive advantage because we're used to operating in an unusual environment. But we don't have the right partner ecosystem. And this is all back, in the beginning when we started to think about it. We have made the centrality of data a key tenet of everything that we do. We're very good at saying those words, very Canadian that way. Not sure if we're actually delivering it, but we're saying the word, so that's all good. We know that we're going to, and we've made it clear that investments have to be made in the infrastructure, and I can talk a little bit about that later. One of the key things for us is that we have to resist the temptation to adapt the processes demanded by the technology to our 1915s processes that we're really comfortable with. Okay, so it means we have to adopt the processes that are demanded by the technology. And that's hard. That's hard for any bureaucratic institution. And there are no institutions more bureaucratic in some ways than the military. That means we've got to stop with the customization. We have a tendency to take a product like, I don't know, SAP, and customize it to the point where it falls under its own weight. We have to understand that we're going to have some overlap with legacy systems. But we got to reduce the overlap like this. What we have a tendency to do is just add layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. We never get rid of the legacy. We have this new idea of the fallacy of the legacy idea, because the moment you deploy something, it's on its way to becoming a legacy capability. And we used to think about legacy in terms of 15 years, and sometimes in terms of 15 minutes now. And we need to think about that. So legacy, like cyber mission assurance, has to be baked into the cake. We've got to stop with the temptation to silo-wise and give top-down direction. It has to be horizontal. The two keys for success of transformation at scale, based on our readings, is a strategic leader wakes up every morning and says, where's my goddamn transformation? And horizontality. And happening today, and as it does every second Friday, and I missed it for the first time in a long time, I've been hosting a digital cross-functional team that has about 200 people from all the different elements of CAF, civilian and military. And I started it at the director general / general level, and now it's corporals and captains. I completely democratized it because that's where all the initiatives are coming from. Okay, so those are the principles. In terms of the context, you know all of this. And it's clear it should be clear to everybody that the world has changed. That AUKUS, and you'll notice I've picked out AUKUS deliberately. By the way, it's not about nuclear subs. It's not about nuclear subs. It's about 3 eyes versus 5 eyes. Now, everybody wants to wait to see when I say the thing that gets me fired. That was probably it. If we can't keep pace with our allies, then we're limiting the strategic options that we give to the government, right? Because you know how we always succeed at every military operation? Because we never tell the government to do that we can do something we can't. Okay, so we only provide them with options that are doable, but there'll be fewer and fewer doable options if you can't talk to your allies. So we decided to go, and this is key, we're going with a CAF only digital campaign plan. Okay, and a campaign plan is a subset of a strategy. D&D, the department and CAF have not issued the strategy yet. Okay, we crafted an outline of one for them. All the recommendations have been to get on with the strategy, but we had to make some assumptions about what the strategy would say so we could write our campaign plan. We have a bunch of drivers for this. On the left-hand side, it's our allies. And there's a lot of things in there. And the American JADC2, Joint All-Domain C2 concept of the mission partner environment is driving us very rapidly. And if we don't keep up, we'll be irrelevant. And on the adversarial side, we're being continuously tested. I received, I'm quite proud of this. I received a reprimand from the Chinese government. I forget what the letter is called. It's called something, somebody in GAC will know. Because at a conference in Tel Aviv on modeling and simulation, and I was still in uniform at the time, I said, of course, Canada's at war with China right now. And that apparently didn't go over very well. So. Okay, so here's our problem statement. I'll let you read it. So it's about operations, it's about stewardship of resources, being effective and efficient, and it's about our workforce. And you can see this is, you're basically looking inside the military approach to solving a big problem. Sorry. So what we did, I'll just go back. So we gave this problem statement. We said, hey, Vice Chief of Defense Staff, we'd like you to send us a letter telling us what should be in the campaign plan. So I wrote that letter for her because I knew we were going to write the digital campaign plan. Okay, but it meant we could drive it. And that letter went out broadly across D&D CAF, so it was part of the socialization. And she gave us some specific tasks. It's got to be about mashing capability with outputs and that are derived by policy. The 5 F's in there is force generation, force employment, force development, force sustainment, and force management. Okay, but we also had to take it to the departmental results framework that everybody else has, all the other governmental departments, and those are our 6 elements. Then we need to do some mapping. We've had unconstrained growth out there. In medicine, if you have unconstrained cellular growth, it's often considered to be a bad thing. It's often considered to be cancer. We're not going to excise it, but we are going to give it some chemo and get it moving in the same direction. And we have to understand the requirement for the establishment of standards. We can no longer just expect stuff to be there when we need it. So for the longest time, the decisions on where to invest in IMIT was left up to the ADM of IMIT without any clear demand signal from the Canadian Armed Forces as to what he should be investing in, he or she. And so we were a really bad customer. So that means we had to clearly state the minimum requirements for the technical backbone, but we've got to get after data. When this was written at the time, the plan was to start working on data tagging in 2027. Okay, so what's the point? It's the first thing you got to do, metadata tagging followed by data cataloging. Am I completely out to lunch there? I mean, grade 8 science was the best 2 years of my life, but you know. And then we have to understand that there's some cultural shifts that have happened as a direct result of this, and we need a change leadership plan. Literacy will be critical, and on day one, I believe it is one of my colleagues, Lieutenant Colonel Josh Clemens, he exposed our plan for digital literacy. We also have to reconceive of what professional military education looks like in the digital space and not just the data space. So we have to get after the good work that we're doing in the simulation and experimentation realm. And we have some great work being done in something called the Joint Operations Fusion Lab. But we also just need to find stuff that works and scale it, okay? And we need to stop the fratricide that happens between the services. Well, no, we've got a My Army app, so we're not going to touch the My Navy app. Well, so My Navy app already does what it says. How do we call it the My Everything app? And how about if we have a boss that tells them to stop working on their version? We were told to establish, and we did, digital transformation delivery teams that went out to the L1s to help them with some critical problems. And we chose four common administrative processes, really, that we thought would touch the most people. And then procurement, procurement, right? It's I was involved in the writing of an MC, and I'm now writing the Treasury Board submission for an initiative for strengthening digital backbones, $200 million. And I planted an Easter egg in the MC that said that we need to pivot procurement to X as a service. We got to stop buying things. We got to start buying outcomes. And so the money we got was vote one, which is really, really useful. So this is the vision that we crafted for the Chief of Defense Staff. So what we do in operations is we have to link sensors to effectors, okay? So sensors create the data, okay? And really what we do is we need to sense, we need to make sense, we need to decide, and then we need to act. So really you need to link the sensor to the decider, to the actor or the effector. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a kinetic effect. Our model for how you link the sensor to the effector has a technical backbone, superimposed over that as a data fabric, and superimposed over that as an application layer. And we call that pan-domain command and control. And the idea is to get better faster, higher quality decisions faster than our adversaries, and at the speed of our allies. And then a mission statement. Brad would probably give it a B-. It's got all the elements of a mission statement. Who's going to do it, when they're going to do it by, what they're going to do, and a little bit of the why in order to. Okay, so then we wrote the campaign plan. And these are the principles that are in the campaign plan. And the reason I'm showing you this is so you can see the rigor of the thinking and the way in which we convince senior leaders and the entire department to understand where we're going with this. So first of all, we got to push power to the edge. Brad talked about a little bit with pushing power to the edge with the tactical operator having the most room to maneuver. So we need to do that. We need to push as far down as possible. We need to make it about people. Okay, it need to be about those people that are locking up their phone, crossing the threshold into the 19th century. We can't just talk about data. We got to do it, and it's got to be a couple of things. Democratize to me is very important. Increasingly, I'm starting to believe that you take the work to the data, not the data to the work. And this is something that the Americans have realized. I was down in 18 Airborne Corps not that long ago, and their assistance with the Ukrainian military, it was about, why don't we just take the work and take it over here to where the data is, as opposed to worrying so much about whether we're going to have a data lake or a data silo or a data fabric or a data mesh. So it's a different way of looking at it. You've heard me say already, we have to adopt the processes that are demanded by digital technology. We cannot keep using one-right bookkeeping systems to keep track of cryptocurrency, because that's what we would do. In fact, that's what we do. And we have to embrace the benefits, but we have to be aware of the risks. And the real change is going to be on the human, conceptual, and cultural side. The deputy CIO of the Department of Defense down in the States said, we don't have a technology gap or a technology deficit. We have a policy gap or a policy deficit. And that's a real key one. And it's a real key one when you're dealing with the government. The favorite decision of almost everybody in government is to not make a decision without understanding that that's a decision. And in a time of transformative change, the single most dangerous course of action is probably the status quo. And we're just not understanding that. We're not understanding the inflection point that we are in as a country and as a department and as a military. So we also said, hey, we're pretty good at this agility thing already because we do it on operations. I'm an infantry guy, and I got deployed to Iraq in 16, 17, and I commanded a strategic advice team, okay, a ministerial liaison team. We provided strategic advice to the actual ministers of defense, of the interior, of health, and the national security advisor. And I did it with 13 colonels from 8 countries. On top of that, I was given 60 people and a budget of $2.2 billion to train and equip the Syrian military and the Iraqi military. So we do the agility thing pretty well, because that had nothing to do with close with and destroy the enemy, which was my job for 40 years. Okay, overcome the bias to status quo. Okay, get after it. Test and adjust all the time. So we call it the PIMA construct. We plan, execute, monitor, and adjust. We love to execute. That's awesome. And the only way we can execute is if we do some planning, so we're pretty good at that. Monitoring, adjusting, that's boring. Okay, let's just make another plan. Let's do some more operations. We got to make sure everyone knows that this is important and that we're doing it. We are about to lose, if we haven't already, the digital natives. They don't think we get it, and they're probably right. There's the odd few like myself and others that are clearly quite old and broken, but that do get it. But there's a frozen middle that doesn't, because they see the risk, but not the benefit. So we've done a good job of talking about the risks entailed, why we have to counter the risks. We have to counter those risks. We haven't talked about the benefits. And then we have to remember that it's all about pan-domain command and control. So we had developed a model of where we are and where we want to be. And I'm not going to walk through it. I'll just let you look at it for a bit. This is all in the campaign plan, and a copy of that should be posted on the agenda. I personally think we're being too kind to ourselves in our description of how we are now. We're analog, we're linear, we're lumbering. I think I just did a bit of self-description as well. And you can see where we want the outcome we're expecting. Okay, and this is direction that's being provided to us. This was signed by the Chief of Defense Staff. So we had to come up with a maturity model. So this is our digital maturity model. We say we're digitally aware now. We want to be digitally enabled by 2025, transformed by 2030, and then we move into something called continuous improvement. This model is important to us because it helps refine a whole bunch of thinking. It provides a framework. So our literacy initiative has aspects of this. If you can see low levels of digital literacy, rising levels, mature, and it's about understanding that, okay? And understanding the relationship between all of those pieces. And then you put it all together, okay? And I said I would go fast, so we could do more time for questions or just buy Dave Anderson 3 beers. So the mission is on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you decide what your strategic outcomes should be, and then you develop your 5 lines of effort that will get you there. Superimpose over time, which is the stages of digital maturity. So you can see the simplicity of this actual campaign design, and that's what this is called. This is called the campaign design. Subset of a strategy. Each of those lines of effort has 3 objectives. And we wrote these objectives using non-military approach to it. So we use the objectives are based off of the OKR methodology. So there's 3 objectives in each of the lines of effort to which we can attach key results, which will make it easier to do MOE and MOP as we start to roll that out. I'll talk a little bit about that. This is my last slide. Look at that, not bad, eh? So it's like it's Friday or something. Okay, so next steps for us is developing the outcome-based plan. So the outcome-based plan is identifying the key activities that will lead to the key results that are necessary for each of the objectives within each of the lines of effort. Okay, so it's nested. We can then aggregate those key results to create MOP and MOE, and then we can come up with our change management plan and our plan for continuous improvement to get after the monitor and adjust. We can't fall into that trap we always do, which is to value that which we can measure, as opposed to measure that which we're supposed to value, because everybody goes to the first one because it's easy. You got an easy quantitative metric, I'm going to measure that, even though if it's not the thing you should be valuing the most. Public affairs people are worse for that. There were 6 retweets. Okay, what does that mean? How have we moved the needle of understanding? What's your assessment? Well, we had 6 retweets, which is like 4 more than 2, sir. You know. The step after that is the funding. I made reference to the Strength of the Digital Backbone initiative. So in June, we were told that there was a $1.8 billion available in budget 2022 for non-NORAD modernization. And so a bunch of people like me, most of them 1-stars, the odd consultant like me, got together and started looking at it. And there was like, oh shit, we got seven different things we can do with that. I'm like, yeah, that's really hard to pitch to cabinet. So we had to have a narrative. The narrative was address the now, okay, down payment on the future. And the address the now was to replace all the stuff we gave to the Ukrainians, buy the stuff we bought for the Ukrainians we don't already have, like, I don't know, the ability to take down an aircraft or kill a tank, of minor importance. And then for the future, it was about digital. And the DPU, the Defense Policy Update, is about to come out, and you'll find that it has a very, very strong digital flavor. Very strong. $420 million for enhancing the technical foundation. So that gets after data-centric security. It gets after some of the technical foundation that we need to invest in ADMIM. And then $200 million for the strengthening the digital backbone. And we allocated it into 5 separate areas. So it works out to $40 million a year of vote 1, which isn't a lot. So we chose the 5 focus areas where we could prime the pump and have the most effect. And we don't expect them all to be equally successful. And you need to embrace a symmetrical advance along your lines of effort. In fact, you need to encourage it. One of the maxims of tactics is you don't reinforce failure, you reinforce success. And so where it's succeeding, we'll push more effort into it. Data management is about data tagging and metadata tagging and data cataloging. Digital literacy is about buying off-the-shelf licenses for things like Coursera and LinkedIn and Udemy, and letting the troops get out there and start doing it. And the interface is with their phone, not a system that they have to go to work to log in on. Transformation delivery. Okay, so we had a fire drill. We had all 60,000 people in the military out there on the parade square. How many of you have experience with large-scale digital transformation? There's a lot of foot shuffling and all of this going on, right? Because we don't. And so we need to outsource that. So we need to procure that. So we need to procure a systems integrator. We are creating, much like the cyber hub, we're creating a digital hub. And the idea there is to provide assistance at our level to the services and below to get through the policy problems and the process problems and write playbooks for how to get things done. And then to do some, you're like this, some ISR integration teams. So join ISR. ISR is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. We say we do it, we don't. We have those things, but we don't put them all together. So we're putting a fair bit of money into that. Data-centric security is about the fact that by investing in data-centric security, I was able to convince IM to start working again on ICAM, because the decision had been not to work on ICAM. So if you're not working on data and you're not working on ICAM, then how are you going to digitally transform? It's impossible. So by funding data-centric security, which is an imperative from the Americans' perspective, we can get after something that's fundamental, which is identity credential access management, or ICAM. And then innovation and experimentation, my favorite bit. So we have something called the Joint Operations Fusion Lab that we created in order to experiment. And we have a top secret network there, and we've got some pretty good simulation. We're putting $30 million into that over 5 years to become the innovation hub for the CAF. Because right now right now we're relying on DRDC, who have come up with the 5-year plan for rapid innovation. Okay. And that's probably not the way to go. And I was at a conference, an AI conference in Montreal with the AI Centec about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And they brought together a whole bunch of small startups to connect with defense, but they were connecting with DRDC. And those are scientists who work on stuff that's defense related. Because the defense doesn't really understand science, it means they get paid to work on the things they want to work on, right? And so they weren't connecting with defense, they were connecting with scientists who do defense stuff. And so we're going to make the innovation hub a place where startups can come and give a 3-minute pitch. Instead of a 3-week ideas submission, that they get an answer on 18 months later, by which time the company's probably gone and exploded. And the final element of this is something called the COAL, the CAF Operational AI Lab. So originally we wanted an AI center. So D&D CAF AI Center, the DCAC. But the people that are responsible for it is ADM DIA or DTO. And their response was, we'll hire 17 civilians, sweet, and they'll be like a call center, the policy. We went, right? No, we're not. So we're getting after it ourselves. And we're going to, I don't know, hire some scientists. And we're going to buy some AI stacks. And we're going to buy some synthetic data. And we're going to do some experimentation. And the whole point behind both of those elements is to de-risk something called the National Defense Operations Intelligence Center, a $1.8 billion project that's going to deliver in 2030. It's the National Defense Secure Campus. The center of it is the new Operations and Intelligence Center. And I think it's an open secret now. It was going to be at Shirley's Bay, and now it's going to be at Carling. And we're getting after that now, right? So the idea is we can do experimentation with the command and control processes, policies, and tools to do in the NDOIC or the NDOIC. We like our acronyms. I'm actually responsible for most of those. The DCAC, I love that. I want to have DCAC, I need it too, you know. So it's the idea is to de-risk all of that. We then need to, continue to align with the departmental objectives and plans. Now that we have an ADM DTO who's arrived, he's arrived for Treasury Board, where he's working for OCIO, and he's got some plans. And so we need to be able to align with that. We've also got a new ADM-IM who's very different than the last one. And it's going to be, we've got some new energy. But we also have to continue to build our partner ecosystem, which is part of the reason that we're here to do all of that. And that, folks, is a fast track to a beer.
Thank you very much. I was a solid presentation, sort of back to the future. So we'll talk over a beer. 3 beers. But it's
I'll answer in French.
That's okay. I'll answer in Dutch if after 3 beers. No, it's okay. Okay, good. Do you folks, let me take a look over here in the virtual room. We got a question here. How important is workforce culture for implementation?
Yeah, so you can't understate that. It's primordial. This is not a technology problem, okay, at all. It's a people problem because it's a culture problem, okay? And culture is the aggregate of your actions and your behaviors, okay? So if we're going to change the culture, we want to change the aggregate of actions and behaviors which are based on beliefs and understanding. I really think we're very, very close to losing the middle. In fact, I think we're very close to losing them all if we're not careful. And I do use this kind of draconian language when I talk. So if we don't get to the people, it's not going to happen. We have to give them the power to be the drivers of change, right? So we need change from the bottom up, and we need to pick winners and losers and go, yeah, that's a good one, let's go. Okay, and say, not this time, but try again. And then let them try again. And give them an attaboy for failing. The old acronym, the old idea of fail forward fast. We fall backwards very slowly, okay? Because if we fell forward slowly, we'd actually be progress because we'd be further ahead than we were before, okay? So we just keep standing up and the back of our head hits the pavement, and eventually we're quite a bit further back from where we were. And that's because of our culture. So Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous participant, great question. It is always about the people because people drives culture.
Any other questions, sir? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Question is, can you comment on the need to harden smartphones and mobile platforms against, for example, against TikTok spyware used by personnel to de-risk operational security? So somebody left the door open to the barn, right? The horses are all gone, okay? We need to understand that. We need to understand that there's an element of risk to this. We can absolutely do this. We could take away everyone's smartphones because there's a risk. Of course, there's a risk. It's funny how people get really aggravated about the idea of letting the military inside their own device. so that we can do, I don't know, the DWAN on your own device, because they shouldn't have my data. These are the same people that have a Siri and an Alexa and all the rest of it, use WhatsApp and think that TikTok is cool and all the rest of it. So we're starting to think about three types of data that have to be managed and kept separate, and it is related to the question. There's personal data that's gathered by your employer, in our case, the military or the department. There's personal data that's gathered by the government, tax returns, et cetera, et cetera. And there's this massive reams of personal data that's gathered by the community that's out there, the community of data thieves and the monetizers of our personal data. We should only get really concerned if any of them touch each other. Okay, so I don't want the military to be accessing my government data, and I don't want Google to be accessing my military data. Do you understand what I mean? So hardening it is hard. When I was in Iraq, I had a cell phone, but it was a burner cell phone. It was a burner cell phone that I used with the full knowledge that we were being listened to, right? When I was in Afghanistan, absolutely not a thing. And on operations, we've disabled all thumb drives. Enough with that. It's ridiculous. Thumb drives are a huge vector for threat. So it's about balancing the security threat against the reality that people need to be able to live. You can't take their phones. The old saying after World War II for the Americans was, once they've seen France, seen Paris, you can't keep them on the farm. Okay, that's the same thing for the Canadian people.
Any other questions? Please.
You mentioned there's different levels of ambition that you offer to higher ups initiating this. So I was wondering if there's any areas of pushback or compromise or areas where there's extra buy-in.
Yeah, could you just do it a little bit louder, the first part?
So you mentioned there was different levels of ambition. That you
Yeah, okay. So it's about the levels of ambition. So I'm the one that gave that presentation of the DM and the CDS back in January of 21, which feels like forever ago. And we did it very deliberately, right? And what we did is the presentation, the foundation of that presentation was the 30-page discussion paper on digital transformation. It was meant to introduce these concepts. None of them read the 30 pages, and I'm hoping they read the one-page summary that was on the front. Dear person who's too important to read, to have information on which to base your decisions. Here's a little bit of information on which you can base your decisions. But you know what? You don't get to choose. We could have chosen just to do optimization. Okay, we could have. And there are some organizations out there that insist that that's all government can do is optimization. The trouble is our adversaries are not optimizing, they're transforming. And more importantly, our allies are. So our customers are not the Canadian people, okay? Our customers are our allies and our adversaries, okay? People who we work with to kill other people or have a bad effect, a terminal effect, or even not yeah, I gotta stop saying shit like that. It's probably too late for that, right? To have an effect on your adversary, right? Yep. You must be a non-drinker.
Thank you for a very active and humorous also presentation. When I look at the threats around, okay, one is it's insurmountable. I like the fact that you say success. Let's highlight the success rather than the challenges. But the challenges are not minimal, because when you look at, okay, 4 years ago, we have our partner South who said we're going to get rid of NATO, and he might come back. And we know also NATO is also getting pressure on Canada to spend 2% of GDP on military, and we are resisting, which means also, and now that you say partners, the Five Eyes and our Three Eyes. So it's not sounding too positive. I'm trying to find where can you encourage me to find positivity in that.
Right. So what I mean by that is we haven't articulated what the benefits of the transformation are. So we routinely say we're short 10,000 people. My pushback, including the CDS, and we grew up together in the military, shared an apartment as a house as a lieutenant together, and that was bad. But it was like, we're not missing 10,000 people. We've got 10,000 people working on stuff that doesn't matter. Okay. We are ripe, absolutely ripe for RPA, particularly in the human resources field. Most of the things that we have our clerks doing should be automated. I mean, come on, franchement, as they say, or as my wife says, Lisette Madeleine. She says it to me a lot, actually. Apparently, I'm a franchement inducer. But the Australians did that. They took their clerical trade, okay, and they took most of the processes, RPA'd them, and then upskilled them to become a digital workforce. Okay, so we haven't been able to get that message across to enough people. The way to solve our personnel crisis is to let our personnel work on things that matter, okay, and things that are important. We talk about elevating the humans up the cognitive chain. Okay, having an analyst that's just scanning back and forth on a map to see something that looks weird is way less effective than having a machine do that, and then queue and slew so that they do detect and we humans do discern. So the problem is the benefits are hard to see. Machiavelli said, and I'll paraphrase, and this is the final statement in the transformation initiative plan that Andy Leslie published a while ago. And I know he put it in there because I sent it to him because we both are big fans of Machiavelli, which is probably weird. Anyways, Machiavelli said that pity the man, and it is a man because it's Machiavelli, pity the man who has to design great change. Because those that will be negatively affected by it can see that immediately. And so the resistance is great. Those that will be positively affected by it have to imagine that. And so the support is less, right? And I'm very much paraphrasing, and you could Google Machiavelli on change. So that's the problem, okay? The people that are going to be negatively changed by digital transformation, people that work in Carling instead of Canada, okay, as an example, the clerical workers that are going to have to learn something new, the public servants who have to make a decision, okay? We haven't been able to articulate why it's such a good thing yet, and that's our problem. Does that make sense?
Okay. Thank you very much. And in certain ways, it's not as bleak as he says, but in certain other ways, it's just amazing. Anyways, whatever. Over 3 beers. He'll be talking French and I'll be talking Dutch. So anyways, I want to thank everybody for your participation. I could give an extra final, presentation, but I think I'll just wrap up the conference right now rather than yet another link to click. Thank you very much for your participation. It's been great. 5th Annual Digital Transformation and Government Conference, 11 to 14 June. Okay, probably at the Université d'Ottawa is going to be in a hybrid format. And hopefully we'll see more people physically here, okay, as distinct from virtual, because I think it's a much more conducive to networking, which I think is one of the important aspects. So I want to thank you all. Just keep in mind, $1.3 trillion spent on digital transformation, 900 billion of it by a Harvard Business Review was basically deemed to have been wasted. Okay, think about that. Even if we can take a little bit of that and basically transfer it. So it's not just in the public sector that there are challenges, there's also in the private sector. Okay, for that. So thank you very much for your participation. We have a networking coffee and cookies and stuff like that out there if you want to just sit there and have a chat and speak to the speakers. But anyways, whatever, I look forward to chatting with you out there. Thank you very much. Take care.
But then I didn't read it.
Take care. I think we'll just cut out the last link, okay? Thank you.
C'est mangé.